One of the legendary figures of the modern age, Jose Arguelles, will be with us. The man who started the harmonic convergence. The man who discovered the importance of 2012. An incredible individual. In his new book, Time and the Technosphere, he writes this: 911, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center gone in the veritable twinkle of an eye. Tragedy, horror, terrorism. The whole world brought to a halt. The aftermath, patriotism, war, and an all-pervading uneasy feeling. What happened? What really happened? Was this the beginning of the apocalypse? Tonight, we will find out from Jose Arguelles. But before he comes on the air, Linda Moulton Howe is going to be talking to... When we're talking to Jose Arguelles, we're going to be talking about a whole new kind of calendar. For example, today is September the 21st, but not in this calendar. Very ancient and very new. It's the Mayan calendar. It is an extraordinary, perfect calendar. 365 days divided into 13 moons of 28 days each. For example, today is the 21st. But in the 13 moon calendar, this is day 2 of moon 3, called Electric Moon Day 2. Each day has got a solar seal, a tone, and a 13 moon calendar date. The solar sea of today is World Bridger. The tone of the day is lunar, or tone 2. We're going to find out a lot more about this from Jose as we go into this in the course of the evening. It's going to be, I think, an extraordinary experience, because what he's saying basically is that time and the calendars that we choose to use are related, and that we can become fourth-dimensional beings by using another kind of calendar. And boy, does he make a fascinating case for this in Time in the Technosphere. Jose hasn't written a book in a long time. I remember back during the years of I guess in 1987, the harmonic convergence. It was a powerful thing. The media picked up on it, and it swept the world. I participated in it, and I noticed that things changed after the harmonic convergence. It wasn't the same anymore. There were a lot of changes in the world, and Jose will be talking to us about just what those changes are and what they've meant, and also about 911, which plays a huge role in this book. What is 911 really all about? What actually happened? Why does Jose consider it such a hugely important event? Well, we're going to find all of this out tonight, so get set for a really extraordinary experience with Jose Arguelles, one of the legendary figures of this age on Dreamland. This is Whitney. I'm excited to welcome Jose Arguelles to this program. I have wanted to talk to him since the harmonic convergence, which was an awesome event that he brought into our world. Jose has, after 15 years, written a new book called Time in the Technosphere, and it is another mind bender. He works full-time now on behalf of the World 13 Moon Calendar Change Peace Movement, and is president of the Foundation for the Law of Time. And, you know, before I started reading this book, I didn't even know what the law of time was, and I bet you don't either, but you're going to find out. He's the author of numerous books, including The Mayan Factor, Earth Ascending, Surface of the Zavuya, and he lives right now in Oregon. This is I'm sorry. Usually I go into a break right now, but now we have Jose with us, and so hi, Jose. How are you?
Is that you, Whitley?
This is me, Jose. Hi.
We didn't talk before, huh? Did we have some correspondence once?
Yeah, I think we did. I think we actually talked.
Yeah, I think we did sometime in the early 90s.
Yeah.
I had some vague recollection of that.
Me too, but I don't know what we talked about.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. Here we are now.
Right. Well, this is so exciting. I have read this book from cover to cover, and I would like you to tell us a little bit about what the harmonic convergence was and how you have. We'll get into the year 2012, which has become almost like a subtext of the whole culture at this point. It's a hugely important number in a lot of people's minds, and you brought that number into our minds. So start by telling us a little bit about what the harmonic convergence was.
Yeah, the harmonic convergence was a prophetic flashpoint. It grew out of a long time of study and out of some information I had originally received in 1970 from a man who's recently passed, a guy named Tony Shearer. And this was an ancient Mexican prophecy, the prophecy of the 13 heavens and the 9 hells. And each of those heavens and each of those hells is a 52-year cycle. And the last of these, the 9th hell, ended on August 16th, 1987. And that was supposed to be this, as I said, the prophetic flashpoint. It was to announce to the world that we had better get our act together, because 25 years down the road it was going to be 2012, the end of the whole cycle of history according to the Mayan long count and the Mayan calendar. So the harmonic convergence, I had steamed and brewed on that for a long time, and as a matter of fact, it was in 1983, and because I sat with that information for 16 years or something. In 1983, it finally came to me. We had to have a big ceremony, a global peace meditation around the world on the morning of August 16th of 1987, and we had to get people in resonance with the earth and in resonance with themselves to start sending a signal around the planet that the time had come to be ready for the big changes, and the time had come to be ready to enter into an era of peace and harmony. What was amazing is that people actually heard that call. When I first started putting out that call, I thought, oh my God, how's everyone going to hear this? I'm carrying this prophecy, and I'm supposed to tell everybody in the world about it. And I remember it was 1984 that I knew it was supposed to be called the harmonic convergence, because I knew everything was supposed to harmonically converge, and that we were supposed to harmonically converge into a state of harmony and peace. Well, it was obviously, meant to happen. It was some kind of wake-up call in the DNA of a lot of people around the world. I've been everywhere around the world, and everywhere I go, people say, that harmonic convergence, everything changed in my life after that. And a lot of people, they started going off and doing new things and started to explore themselves, or started to wake up more to nature. But the real point of it was to get people together and to send out the message, we have to get back in resonance with the earth.
That's when my life went to hell.
We have to return to living in harmony with ourselves and with the earth, because come 2012, the cycle is going to close. And when the cycle closes, that means that we will have to have gotten to a place where we're saying to each other, hey, what lessons did we learn?
Yeah. Jose, I want to ask you a little bit about the energy of the harmonic convergence, because it became a huge event worldwide. I participated, Ann and I participated in the harmonic convergence at the Mohonk Mountain House in New Paltz, New York. And there were events going on all over the planet. Now, there must have been something extremely, in fact, after having read this book, I know there was a very powerful and profound energy involved. Now, you state the midpoint of the second 8-year cycle is the harmonic convergence of August the 16th, 17th, 1987. Exactly 14 years after the dedication of the World Trade Center, and 14 years before the inevitable moment of its destruction. Now, what are you wired into, guy? Jeez, I mean, what is going on here?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something, Whitley. I'm wired.
Yeah, I know you're wired.
And what I'm wired to is, among other things, is what we call the synchronic pattern of time. This is the higher fourth dimensional level of time. And
I don't want to keep stopping you, and I won't do this again. But during the course of this program, you're going to learn about how to live on this level of time and how to make this calendar work for you, and it's going to be incredible. Go ahead.
Yeah, so as I said, I seem to be wired into this synchronic pattern of time. That's the fourth dimensional time that exists all the time. When people have some kind of flash of synchronicity, that's fourth dimensional time that's happening. They pop out of the causal and into the fourth dimension. And there's this fourth dimensional order of time, synchronicity, is the natural order. We humans have a hard time with it because we've become conditioned and accustomed to irregular and mechanical time, so it's kind of weird for some people when they have synchronicity. But this synchronic pattern, that's what the ancient Maya, that was for how they were living. And they were living that at a very high level because they understood the mathematics of the timing frequencies that govern that governs the whole universe. Part of my interesting life and destiny was to be kind of like a trip switch for this to begin to happen again. I knew from the harmonic convergence that it's like when you have a big drop a big stone or something in a pond and then it ripples out. And the 1987, August 16th and 17th was when we were coming across one of those big ripples. It was a synchronic ripple, so like people heard the call, they could feel it coming. It was like a subduction zone when the tide comes in, and so they went for it. They went for it everywhere. And then the tide goes out, and you get to another kind of plateau. Well, we're coming into another ripple when we get to 2004. We'll talk about that later, too. I know that. But basically, I found out from the time I was 14 that I was wired into this higher synchronic pattern, and I started noting more and more as my life went on that I seemed to be wired to something very, very different, and that kind of marked me out, and lots of times I didn't know what to do about it or what to do with it, but I kept plugging and overcame lots of obstacles, and then I finally realized, well, I see what it is. I'm really plugged into this synchronic pattern of the Mayan time wave and of the Mayan prophecies, and I'm like a charged chip.
Well, listen, I want to mention, by the way, our science reporter and Linda Moulton Howe is still with us. And Linda, have you got anything any burning questions just now for Jose?
Well, in listening, and hello, Jose.
Hi,
we
Linda.
met and talked in Boulder back in the
way
80s.
back when.
Yeah. I was in Medjugorje in then Yugoslavia on that August 16th to the 17th, and you were talking about synchronicity, and I had no plan of being there. It was as if some greater plan picked me up and plunked me there. It's way too long to explain, but that is where I ended up on August 16th, 1987, with no prior itinerary or plan, and that was where the alleged Virgin Mary was appearing in the rectory to the children in Medjugorje with prophecies of things to come, and one of them had to do with the end of communism and with great changes in Europe. And 2 years later, the Berlin Wall was down, and not too long, we had a complete change from the Soviet Union to Russia. And I've always linked the harmonic convergence to that kind of anticipation that everyone was talking about then.
Yeah, that's really absolutely true, Linda. As a matter of fact, in the first half of 1990, after the Berlin Wall came down, there were a lot of newspaper stories, even newspaper editorials, that were linking the end of the Cold War with the harmonic convergence. There was a big story in the Washington Post, I think about May 4th or 5th, about that whole thing. And then I remember when Gorbachev came to the United States, in June of 1990 on the, I remember on the Dan Rather CBS Evening News, they had a big, they opened a story on Gorbachev in San Francisco by showing a picture of people at the harmonic convergence with a big earth ball. And they said back then people were laughing at it, but look now, Gorbachev's here and he's more popular than Bush. The harmonic convergence worked.
Well, I think it did work. I have always thought it worked because I've watched the world change after the harmonic convergence in absolutely amazing ways. But now, things are getting a little bit darker. And after we cross the top of the hour, I think Linda's going to stay with us. Certainly, we'd love to have you if you'd like to, Linda. And Jose and Linda and I are going to get into what the technosphere is, what the problem is. Why is it getting so dark around here? This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland Factor and the new book, Time and the Technosphere, the Law of Time in Human Affairs. A truly, I mean, it's really a world beater, this book. It is, I have read it all, and I have found that not only is my mind expanded by it, but it offers the potential for a really profound increase in consciousness. You can learn to live in a state of synchronicity. Jose is wired into something very powerful, and this is important stuff. So listen close. And Jose, we were just beginning to talk about the relationship between what's happening now and what was happening back, 15 years ago, and why it is that you are kind of on track with something. Because when I first heard about the harmonic convergence and read the Mayan Factor and began thinking in terms of 2012, I thought to myself, is he right? But, you know, now we're down the road a little bit, and you're still on track. I'm impressed, frankly.
Yeah, well,
I'm a little scared.
Yeah, I never left track.
You didn't, but
no.
The rest of us
the
were
rest
not even
of you did. Yeah, you know, I saw that, like where we left off. You know, when the high point was when Dan Rather was talking about the harmonic convergence and Gorbachev and world peace. Well, then everything got derailed about 2 months after that. And 2 months after that happened, that was Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. But just before he did that, there was something else that happened, and that was the first covert meeting of the G7, the Group of Seven. The Group of Seven had been meeting, the first overt meeting of them. They had been meeting covertly for 15 years since since they were formed in 1974. And
now, what is the Group of Seven? Let's just...
Yeah, the Group of Seven is it was formed in 1974 in the CIA when George Bush Sr. was head of the CIA there. And it was a cartel of the finance ministers of the 7 most industrialized countries in the world. United States of America, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Germany, and Japan. And they had been meeting, and they had been, waiting for the Cold War to end. And when it ended, they had their first public meeting. It was the 16th meeting they had. And about 2 weeks after they had that meeting, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The G7 became more prominent through the 1990s. They actually were the policy makers of the world. That is the world government. And they're behind the GATT, the GATT, the WTO, all of that, everything that happened in the 90s, and the turn toward what we call monetary politics. All that policy was set by the G7. The G7's been setting world policy since 1990. And Russia's gotten in there recently. They've begged their way in, and so they say now G7, sometimes G8. But that's also, you'll find that when it talks in Book of Revelation, chapter 13, about the beast with 7 heads.
Oh my!
That comes on. That's your G7 there. And
that's a subtext of your book that's really awesome, and one that I want to talk about, because you don't actually quote very much from the Book of Revelation in Time in the Technosphere, but it certainly is implicit in a lot of what you've written.
Yeah, it's definitely there. I first became aware of it in the Mayan factor, and then in the 90s I became very aware of it in 1993. I watched all this happening. I saw that what happened was the turn went to very, very hard monetary materialism.
Right.
And then the harmonic convergence got deleted. You won't find any mention of the harmonic convergence in any of the news stories about the top things that happened in the 20th century. I looked at the magazines, nothing there. It's like, forget that.
Yeah, right.
Okay? And
yeah, well, that was just, for them, it was just a media event.
Yeah, exactly.
They only surf this surface.
Yeah. But so anyway, I started becoming acutely aware of the Book of Revelations in the 90s. I was very aware of the 144,000 from the harmonic convergence. That occurs in chapter 7, verse 4, and then again in chapter 14. Right after the talks about the chapter 13 talks about the beast with 7 heads. Chapter 12 starts off with the image of the woman with her crowned with 12 stars, and then with her feet on the moon. And then most versions of the Bible will tell you she was exiled for 1,260 days. And then the next chapter comes up with the beast with 7 heads, chapter 13. And chapter 13 corresponds to in the Mayan calendar. There's 13 Baktuns that mark the whole course of history. We've been in the 13th Baktun from 1618 to 2012. That's the Baktun of materialism. So that 13th chapter, when it talks about the beast with 7 heads, that's the final phase of the 13th Baktun. That's the final phase of the whole cycle of history. So, and then you get done with that, which is a pretty horrific thing, and then you get to chapter 14. The end of chapter 13 is when it says that the beast with 7 heads will put its mark on everyone's forehead. That's the famous 666, all that type of thing.
Right.
And then immediately you hit chapter 14 and says, everyone will have that mark except for the 144,000 who will be dancing to a new song, a new tune in town.
This is where we all want to be.
Yeah.
Okay, Jose, and you're going to help us get there, right?
Yeah, so that's the track. So, like I said, when we were in that harmonic convergence, it said we got 25 years to close the cycle. We'll be able to close the cycle properly if we return to living in the cycles of nature. Well, that's the rub.
That's the hard thing.
Yeah,
to find the cycles of nature, because we've gone almost blind to them. Linda, before we go on, I recall you once telling me about a remarkable experience you had on Patmos at the place where the Book of Revelation was handed down to John.
Yes, that's true. In my life, every once in a while, if I touch stone especially, I get images sometimes of things that have happened there, or at least that's the way I interpret it. And that was really extraordinary, because I had placed my hand inside of one of the holes carved in that cave that they have on the island of Patmos, allegedly where John, who wrote Revelations, stayed when he was doing that work. And I did not know what the holes in the wall in the cave were. The tour guide had been in there before me, and most everybody had left, and I was there by myself. And so I had placed a hand in one of those holes, and I had this strong image of this man on his knees really crying out. And I don't know exactly how all of that works, except that perhaps stone, like a crystal of some sort, retains frequencies through time. It's the best I can offer. It was just really something to have felt what it seemed to me extreme emotion there in that cave where John allegedly had been. And I wondered, Jose, who the woman was that you were mentioning who was exiled for the 1,260
Well,
days.
the woman represents the soul of the world. The woman represents the soul of the world, the psyche of the world. The 1,260 days represents the exile in materialism. What I've discovered was that in terms of the law of time and by my staying on track after the harmonic convergence, I knew I was supposed to finish decoding the mathematics of the Mayan calendar, and that took me to a point on December 10th of 1989, just before the end of the Cold War, where my wife and I were in the Museum of Time in Geneva, Switzerland. And we had been already living on the Mayan timing cycles, 13-day cycles, 20-day cycles, 52-day cycles. And we were in this museum, and for a couple hours, and we looked at each other and said, hey, they got to rename this museum. This is the Museum of Mechanical Time. Mechanical time's not time. It's a mechanized fiction of what real time is about. And at that moment, I had a very strong realization that mechanical time is a frequency, which I describe as the 1260 frequency, irregular 12-month calendar and 60-minute mechanical hour. And this is something that actually was devised by the Babylonians, believe it or not, and it was inherited, finally transmitted through the Vatican and through the invention of the mechanical clock. And because I saw also from my study of the mathematics of the Mayan calendar that there is a natural timing frequency, which I described as mathematically as a ratio constant 13 to 20, which was encoded in the Mayan calendar. And I understood then why the Mayan calendar was running these 13 and 20-day cycles, because this is the natural galactic frequency. So from that, my work developed very fast and in a direction which I never perceived it was going to go. But I saw then that this 1260 frequency represents the frequency of artificial mechanical time. The 13th Baktun, which began in 1618, was the moment in which the whole world got, as it were, captured by this frequency. The Gregorian calendar reform, as it's called, was completed in 1582, 20 years after all the Mayan time knowledge was destroyed in an Auto da Fe in Izamal, Yucatan, and at the same time that the mechanical clock was perfected, so that 1618, when this last Baktun cycle began, the world was, the Europeans had circumnavigated the world. They had virtually taken control of the North and South America, and most of the planet was pretty well falling into European hands at that point. And so the 1260 frequency, it's a mental, unconscious mental frequency conditioned by these timing, what I call the macro program of the calendar and the micro program of the clock, that the mental frequency of the planet was then captured by the 1260, and that's what that means. This woman with the 12 stars around her head and her feet on the moon. Okay.
Mm-hmm. She's in effect crushing the moon.
Yeah.
The old calendar.
Yeah, and she's driven into exile. She actually represents the world soul, because then in that those 1260 days refers to this 1260 timing frequency, because the whole world's been captured by this. It's a hypnotic spell.
I want to ask you on behalf of a listener, if you know anything about the Cross of Henday.
The Cross of Henday.
In France, yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, it's interesting. I will make this then an aside. A listener asked if you could comment on it if you knew, but there are a group of people who believe that tomorrow, actually, September the 22nd, 2002, is an important end-of-time indicator, as pointed out by the Cross of Henday. And it'll be interesting to see if there's anything in it, if anything extraordinary happens tomorrow that we shall see.
Yeah,
but go ahead, Jose. That's just an aside.
Yeah.
I don't want to dwell on it if you're not familiar with it.
Yeah, no. Anyway, I saw that 1260, that also occurs in the 11th chapter, that number, 1260 days. It talks about the two prophets in exile, and they're exiled for 1260 days. Well, I saw that 1260, that actually referred to the 1260 timing frequency, which is an
12 months, 60 minute hour.
12 months, 60-minute hour, and that's based, actually goes all the way back to Egypt and Babylonia. It's based on this concept. Well, when you look at any clock, a traditional clock or a watch, you'll see what you're looking at is a circle divided into 12 parts.
Right.
Okay? That's not time.
No, it isn't. It's a circle divided into 12
It's a
parts.
circle divided into 12 parts with a mechanical hand going around. Okay? And every time you look at it, you deprive yourself of your telepathy.
Now, it looks as if we come up with this particular way of looking at time, of viewing time, and history begins.
Exactly.
That is what happened, isn't it?
Yes, exactly what happened.
Who gave us this? How did we come up with this?
That's an interesting thing there, Whitley. You know, that concept of the 60-minute hour and the 12 and the 24, that is right there at the 3000 BC at the beginning of history. It's interesting that the Mayan long count begins at 3113. It's just to encompass that. And actually, that long count exists to kind of track this whole Babylonian scheme. Where that came from is very...
Now, wait, Jose. It exists to kind of track this whole Babylonian scheme.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are you saying about the knowledge of the Maya here?
Well, the knowledge of the Maya is a galactic knowledge. That means to say it's from a galactic perspective, a perspective that sees the solar system as an entire entity with its planetary system. It's not geocentric point of view. It's not even heliocentric. It's looking at it from a outside even of the solar system here, a galactic point of view. And that knowledge, that galactic knowledge, was enshrined in the classic Mayan civilization through the time knowledge of the many different calendars that they used. They knew time as a factor of synchronization. It has nothing to do with the circle divided into 12 parts.
Right.
Jose, do you think that solar system point of view was transferred to the Mesopotamian region by non-humans?
It's very possible. If you take entities and intelligences living on Saturn and Jupiter as being non-human, because that's where that came from.
Now, why do you say that?
Because this Jupiter and the Saturn, they have a relationship to each other that has that 12 and 60-year cycle, and that also when you look at where Jupiter and Saturn are in the solar system, you see there's something very interesting. You have the point of the five inner planets, if you include the asteroid belt, which was a planet. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you have the 5 outer planets. That's Jupiter and Saturn, and the destruction of that asteroid belt, which was known as the planet Maldek, was a factor that was involved with the entities, say, on Jupiter and Saturn.
So now, who called it Maldek?
Well, that's an interesting thing. That came to me in the 1980s, and it seemed to be very mysterious, and it rang very many bells with me, and I think we're dealing with interplanetary memories.
Okay, we're going to deal with other kinds of memories. And
I think Marduk is actually Marduk. He's the nasty god.
The Cross of Henday, I mentioned this, by the way, during the course of the conversation with Jose, and for those of you who are curious about what I was talking about, I'll elaborate on it a little bit. On Unknown Country, under the Mind Frame tab, on the right-hand side of the page, you will find an Other Websites section. Click on this and go to Ancient Wisdom. I think, and I may not be right about this, but A site called sangral.com is the second or third site in the
Sangral.
list under ancient wisdom. Go to this website and you can learn about the cross of Henday and the Henday prophecy. This prophecy essentially is saying they believe that tomorrow, the day that this is the solstice, this is the this is the autumnal equinox, and tomorrow is a day of enormous significance. And we shall see what tomorrow brings. What will the 22nd of September bring? Will it be a quiet day in the history of the world, or will it indeed be a day of enormous significance? I think that Saddam Hussein's announcement essentially that first he announced that inspectors were free to come to Iraq at any time. Then, I believe yesterday, he said no, they had to abide by the rules that were established that caused them to leave in the first place, and that they weren't actually free to go anywhere they wanted to go. Now, I believe this means war. A friend of mine who is in a supplier for the Pentagon certainly felt like it was going to happen this month, and maybe tomorrow will be the day. We shall see, and be fascinating if it is. So keep your eyes open tomorrow and in the next few days thereafter.
That's supposed to come down in February. Old Bushy isn't going to monkey around with the elections. It's not going to happen before the elections. I heard that 2 months ago.
We live indeed in interesting times right now. Time and the Technosphere, speaking of interesting times, why are they so interesting? One of the things that's always fascinated me about the mind, we've had quite a few guests on this radio program who have pointed out the depth and the profundity of their knowledge and their scientific knowledge. And I've always wondered where that came from. And what do you have to say about that?
Well, where that came from, as I was speaking earlier, that's a galactic knowledge base. And when we talk about that, we're talking about, I think, interdimensional transmissions of information from what we might refer to as different star nodes or different star points. When I first met Humboldt's men, for instance, I invited him to come to Boulder in 1985, and the first thing he...
Now, who was he?
Humboldt's men is a Mayan daykeeper, scholar, lives in Yucatan.
What is it? What is a daykeeper?
Well, someone who follows the calendar and follows the Mayan timing system.
Mm-hmm.
There's daykeepers, there's Quiche Maya daykeepers in Guatemala, and there's some in present-day Yucatan. That's a kind of a generic term, but anyone who's indigenous there following the calendar and trying to maintain those traditions is referred to as a daykeeper. Humboldt is a daykeeper. He's kind of a philosopher and many other things as well. Anyway, I had invited him to Boulder in 1985, and I remember the first thing he said was that this is the seventh star system that the Maya have been on. And so that rang bells with me in terms of understanding the perspective that they developed in their calendars and in their notions of time. So people say, well, where is that? Is that in the Pleiades? I think so. I think we can name the Pleiades, we can name Sirius, we can name Antares, we can name Arcturus, among other points where this Mayan star knowledge has had its basis, and then it has was planted then here on Earth with the specific point of providing us with a gauge of time and of events which is totally apart from the Babylonian mainstream, which
right.
is very important. That if we did not have the Mayan frame of reference, we would all be thoroughly immersed in the Babylonian mainstream, and we would be suffocating in an unbearable apocalypse, which will be happening to some degree anyway. But we do have, with the Mayan time frame, what you might call the emergency exit.
Let me ask you, if we, as individuals, embrace the Mayan time frame, two questions. A, how do we do this? And B, what happens to us?
Well, the way to do it has now been made very practical, because for the last 10 years we have been living through the Mayan timing system through a simple device which is referred to as the 13-moon 28-day calendar. This is not specifically a Mayan calendar, though it was one of the 17 calendars that the Maya were using in their heyday. The Druids have this calendar, and you can still find this calendar, the Druid tree calendar, 13-moon 28-day calendar in England. You can find this calendar still being used in South America, where it has been used for 5,500 years. And my research shows that it was virtually used by virtually every people on every continent, the Polynesians, in ancient prehistoric China, prehistoric India, that this 13-moon 28-day timing device was the standard device. It's correlated with what I would discover to be the natural galactic timing frequency, the 1320 frequency. So this calendar, 13 months or 28 days each, is correlated with the 260-day cycle. And this 260-day cycle is the fourth dimensional cycle. So because it's correlated to this cycle here, it allows us to begin to live in what's called the synchronic order, where synchronicity is the norm. So it's easy to follow a calendar, much easier than the Gregorian calendar, which 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except for February, which has 28, except on leap years it has 29, and on the leap year, on the centuries that are not multiples of 4, don't have a leap year. So that's the Gregorian calendar.
Well, that seems simple enough, Jose.
Yeah.
No problem there.
So the 13 months or 28 days, every day of the week, every month is always the same. There's no, you don't get lost in that. And because it's correlated to the 260-day cycle, it creates factors of synchronization and synchronicity, which put us in tune with the natural fourth dimension time wave.
Could I ask?
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
You were saying, Jose, that there was a great difference between what the Babylonian point of view would be versus the Mayan. In your mind, do you think that implies that there were two competing agendas by two possible non-human entities here on the planet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm really not certain. All I know is that the Babylonian agenda has prevailed as the dominant agenda of world civilization, especially in the last 400 years, especially with the conquest of the rest of the world by the Europeans, which was financed actually by the Vatican and 400 years ago, and they were carrying on what I would call the Babylonian legacy. The Maya, as you know, were not in the old world, not in the Afro-Eurasian landmass, but were in the new world in the between North and South America, for a long time very remote from the Babylonians, and it would seem that was very intentional, that development occurred in that part of the world. They lived in a very, from a Babylonian point of view, they lived in a very unsophisticated technological society, but a highly sophisticated mental synchronic order society, and that their purpose was to make sure that the Mayan standard, the Mayan galactic standard, was established on this planet, so that when we got to this point, the end time, that we would have this other frame of reference, as I said, to give us the emergency exit to give us the way of getting back to living in the cycles of nature, which, as you recall, where we began with the harmonic convergence. The harmonic convergence said we can all harmonically converge if we get the point that by 2012 we have to be living according to the cycles of nature. And the way we live according to the cycles of nature is you have to leave artificial Babylonian time, and you have to enter into a natural timing frequency. And the instrument to help you enter the natural timing frequency is the 13